"You who caught the turtles better eat them," goes the ancient adage. The origin of the expression is as follows. It was said that a group of fishermen caught a large number of turtles. After cooking them, they found out at the communal meal that these sea animals were much less edible than they thought. Not many members of the group were willing to eat them. But Mercury happened to be passing by. Mercury was the most multitasking, sort of put-together god, as he was the boss of commerce, abundance, messengers, the underworld, as well as the patron of thieves and brigands, and, not surprisingly, luck. The group invited him to join them and offered him the turtles to eat. Detecting that he was only invited to relieve them of the unwanted food, he forced them all to eat the turtles, thus establishing the principle that you need to eat what you feed others. A customer is born every day. I have learned a lesson from my own naive experiences. Beware of the person who gives advice, telling you that a certain action on your part is good for you, while it is also good for him, while the harm to you doesn't directly affect him. Of course, such advice is usually unsolicited. The asymmetry is when said advice applies to you but not to him. He may be selling you something or trying to get you to marry his daughter or hire his son-in-law. Years ago, I received a letter from a lecture agent. His letter was clear. It had about 10 questions of the type, "Do you have the time to field requests? Can you handle the organization of the trip?" The gist of it was that a lecture agent would make my life better and make room for the pursuit of knowledge or whatever else I was about. A deeper understanding of gardening, stamp collections, Mediterranean genetics, or squid ink recipes, while the burden of the gritty would fall on someone else. And it wasn't any lecture agent, only he could do all these things. He reads books and can get in the mind of intellectuals. At the time, I didn't feel insulted by being called an intellectual. As is typical with people who volunteer unsolicited advice, I smelled a rat. At no phase in the discussion did he refrain from letting me know that it was good for me. As a sucker, while I didn't buy into the argument, I ended up doing business with him, letting him handle a booking in the foreign country where he was based. Things went fine until 6 years later I received a letter from the tax authorities of that country. I immediately contacted him to wonder if similar U.S. citizens he had hired incurred such tax conflict, or if he had heard of similar situations. His reply was immediate and curt. "I am not your tax attorney," volunteering no information as to whether other U.S. customers who hired him because it was good for them encountered such a problem. Indeed, in the dozen or so cases I can pull from memory, it always turns out that what is presented as good for you is not really good for you, but certainly good for the other party. As a trader, you learn to identify and deal with upright people, those who inform you that they have something to sell, by explaining that the transaction arises for their own benefit, with such questions as, "Do you have an axe?" meaning an inquiry whether you have a certain interest. Avoid at all costs those who call you to tout a certain product disguised with advice. In fact, the story of the turtle is the archetype of the history of transactions between mortals. I worked once for a U.S. investment bank, one of the prestigious variety, called White Shoe because the partners were members of hard-to-join golf clubs for proto-aristocrats where they played the game wearing white footwear. As with all such firms, an image of ethics and professionalism was cultivated, emphasized, and protected. But the job of the salespeople, actually salesmen, on days when they wore black shoes was to unload inventory with which traders were stuffed, that is, securities they had in excess in their books and needed to get rid of to lower their risk profile. Selling to other dealers was out of the question, as professional traders, typically non-golfers, would smell excess inventory and cause the price to drop. So they needed to sell to some client on what is called the buy side. Some traders paid the sales force with percentage points, a variable compensation that increased with our eagerness to part with securities. Salesmen took clients out to dinner, bought them expensive wine, often ostensibly the highest on the menu, and got a huge return on the thousands of dollars of restaurant bills by unloading the unwanted stuff on them. One expert salesman candidly explained to me, If I buy the client, someone working for the finance department of a municipality who buys his suits at some department store in New Jersey, a bottle of $2,000 wine, I own him for the next few months. I can get at least $100,000 profits out of him. Nothing in the market gives you such return. Salesmen hawked how a given security would be perfect for the client's portfolio, how they were certain it would rise in price, and how the client would suffer great regret if he missed such an opportunity, that type of discourse. Salespeople are experts in the art of psychological manipulation, making the client trade, often against his own interest, all the while being happy about it and loving them in their company. One of the top salesmen at the firm, a man with huge charisma who came to work in a chauffeured Rolls-Royce, was once asked whether customers didn't get upset when they got the short end of the stick. "Rip them off, don't tick them off," was his answer. He also added, "Remember that every day a new customer is born." As the Romans were fully aware, one lauds merrily the merchandise to get rid of it.